We're on Daf Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph. Tonight we're starting basically a new sugya. As you know the way Gemara works, it's associative, it's on a topic, it exhausts the topic, or at least delves into the topic, and then it draws back to get the next clause out of the Mishnah. We're up to the words Tana, Yavesh, Pasul. The first word on the line, it's about just after the halfway mark on the page on Daf Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph. The first word is Adami or Dmei. Period, and then it's Tana Yavesh Pasul, and we'll start momentarily. Just to recap, now zoomed out at 30,000 feet, what we've studied pretty much since the beginning of this year was the sugya of mitzvah haba ba'avera. We studied it very much in depth, and the sugya that we're about to enter also, we could spend an extraordinary amount of time on it. There are two subjects here, maybe even three, that the basis for them, the springboard, is the conversation about the lulav, the daled minim, but the fact is that these are shas concepts that one could spend a lot of time studying, and we won't delve into either of them tonight. Tonight I'm hoping to do sort of the surface to lay the groundwork for some of our discussions. As you know, in this shir, I'm not endeavoring to cover ground as much as to try to delve to some extent into the depth of what it is that we're trying to understand, what Chazal are trying to convey. The first sugya, mitzvah haba ba'avera, lulav hagazul, the name of the part of the parak, and then it's lulav hagazul v'hayavesh, pasul. So gazul and yavesh were put together, and we talked a little bit about the juxtaposition of those two. Let's dive into the Gemara together now, again, to lay some of the groundwork to try to get into the next shas topic, which quite frankly is one of the reasons why in many yeshivot, this is an important parak that they study. So when I learned this with the Mori Rabbi Michael Rosenzweig, so it was parak Gimel, was a whole year focused on these sugyas. Let's go into it now. Tana Yavesh Pasul Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. We have here a quote right at the beginning of the discussion, where we see that actually somehow Rabbi Yehuda thinks that a dried out lulav is kosher, as opposed to what we saw in the Mishnah, where there didn't sound like there were any dissenting opinions. But here we quote, it's Braita, that in fact he does think that it's kosher. Amar Rava, this interpretation of Rava, of the machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda, is the basis for everything that we'll see tonight. Rava maintains machloket belulav. The machloket is specifically and exclusively with regard to the lulav. The Rabbanan Savri makshina lulav la'etrog. We had someone raise this in a previous shir, so I don't remember who it is now, but anyone could take credit and that would be fine. I wouldn't remember. Do we see all, well, I'm anonymous, so do we see all four of the daled minim that are in this pasuk, our headquarters pasuk from Parshat Emor, Parak Chav Gimel, Sefer Vayikra? Do we see that pasuk as reflecting a unanimous or a uniform, it's a better word, uniform standard for all of these elements? Whatever we apply to one, we apply to all. This is a question we had at the beginning of the Masechta, where we say, well, why is it just say the word lulav? Is lulav a stand-in for all four, or is lulav by itself? And I pointed out, this is going to be a question of the Gemara. Further, we'll see that the Mishnah after are going to talk about the hadas yavesh, the etrog yavesh, etc. Rava says the machloket between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. Another question, why isn't Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah? You remember in Masechet Sukka, many, many years ago now, so 2 years ago, BC, before COVID, in my Sukkah, we started Masechet Sukkah, and what did we see there, right there? The Rabbanan say 20 amot is the limit, and who was the dissenting opinion saying there's no upper limit to the Sukkah? Rabbi Yehuda. He was quoted in the Mishnah. We come to this Mishnah, he's effaced, he doesn't exist. The Braita tells you, by the way, there is a machloket here also. Tana Yavesh Pasul Yehuda Mafsir. So Rava says machloket belulav. This is about the lulav specifically. The Rabbanan Savre makshina lulav la'etrog. They think that there is a hekesh between a lulav and an etrog. They're next to each other in the pasuk. Ma etrog by hadar, af lulav by hadar. Recall that the word hadar is not at the beginning of the pasuk, as in, here are four species that all need to be hadar, colon, etrog, lulav, hadasim, aravot. No, L'kachtem lachem bayom harishon. Pre-Eitz Hadar, comma. Kapot Tmarim, comma. Anaf Eitz Avot
V'arvei Nachal.
4 different clauses separated, at least in the latter 2 cases with commas, the letter Vav and. But the adjective Hadar goes specifically, narrowly on the etrog. Rabbanan think that that's true, but that standard of Hadar might have come up with the etrog. It's first in line, but it applies to at least to the lulav and probably to the other species as well. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda savar lo makshinan lulav le'etrog. Yeah, aval be'etrog divrei kol hadar ba'ina. But everyone must agree that with regard to the etrog, we need a standard of Hadar. The pasuk says so. Pre-Eitz Hadar. So we can't deny the need for hidur, the beauty, when it comes to the etrog itself. Again, I'm doing surface tonight. You're welcome to ask questions. Most of them I'll just answer by saying that's a good question, either to be polite or because we're just not going to deal with it tonight too much. Well, we'll see some Rashi and Tosif in a minute, but this is just laying the groundwork so we have sort of a
Francie's been raising his hand for a while.
I did not see him. I'm sorry, Francie. I'm using that part of Zoom where I can only see
not a problem. Thank you, Arnold.
Go talk,
Okay.
please.
Each item of the 4 have their requirements, beauty and whatever it might be,
Height or whatever. Yeah.
right. But you need all of them together to perform the mitzvah.
Yes.
Whatever the case may be. So when we talk about lulav, I would think you're talking about lulav and etrog. You're talking about the whole package.
Because how could you have one without the others?
It wouldn't do you any good.
Good. Your thought line right here about this, about aren't they all interdependent, is in my view, I could be wrong, is exactly in line with the way the Gemara's thought process is about to go.
Okay.
What if there's one missing?
Weiter.
But that's exactly that's amazing. You're already thinking, but that's the next. That's going to be coming. You'll see. It's coming up with the next half page. Is the Gemara's going to say, well, okay, what if we only have 3? What if what could we do? Is it really a zero-sum game, 4 or 0?
If somebody stole your lulav, can you take the etrog?
Right, etrog, and you hold up the little bundle with the adasim and a rava.
Right.
Aside from everybody making fun of you in the shul, there's also a question of your makana mitzvah.
We won't go down that road.
Yeah, we'll go down that road. Okay, so let's see it inside. But just at the outset, just on this little section here, the question is: we see a list of things, and the adjective of hidur goes on the word etrog. The Rabbanan hold it goes on everything, but Rabbi Yehuda says no. If it wanted to go on everything, it would have said ulakatim lachem b'yom harishon hidur. I don't know, something like that. I don't want to say pre-hadar because they're not all payrot, as we'll see soon in Tosfot. Right. That's germane to this conversation.
Hadarim or something.
Say again.
I gather that what you're trying to say is that the hadar would go on all 4 species.
Correct.
At the end of the clause there.
Nachon. But it doesn't. It's just on pre-Eitz Hadar.
Exactly.
And I'll understand it's for everything.
Can you repeat what Benny just said? I couldn't hear it.
Benny just said that. Go ahead, say it again, Benny.
Basically, if it wanted to go on all 4 species, it would have come, the word hadar would have come at the end of the enumeration of the 4 species, as opposed to it really is the end of peri-eitz, which refers specifically to the etrog. At least that's the way it appears.
Yeah, excellent. At the end, the arvei nachal hadar. So we said, oh, it's on the whole pasuk. It's summation. Yeah. I was saying it, in the Western way that it's the first word colon, but you could say, oh, it's at the end. It wraps it up. But that's not what it says. So, and again,
could have even said hadarim.
Yeah,
that's what
that's Benny's point. Is it could have been at the end. Yeah, hadarim. So modifying everything. Yeah. So look.
But
isn't there an opinion? Oh, sorry.
Wait, Nathan had the floor first. Listen, go.
Isn't there the opinion also that hadar is is to help you identify the fruit, and it's
Yeah.
not the characteristic of the fruit. It's
Yeah.
actually telling you that is the fruit.
Yeah, the hadar, that it has some kind of it lasts on the tree from year to year. It doesn't have a season where it just falls off by itself. True, and that it grows like at any time. That's true. It seems in this context, everybody's taking, it seems, as a given that the word hadar refers to the beauty of it, and that the word hadar, where the Art, you're going to correct me here, or Benny, help me. There's a dagesh in the letter dalid. If it's hadar bi'ilano mishana shana, something like that.
Yeah, you double the dalit sign if there's a
Double down with the dalid, with the dot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would imply like it dwells, like a dira is a dwelling place. But it's not in the Torah written that way, really. And the Torah does not have the dagesh, i.e., it's pronounced hadar in the manner of hidur. You know, two different words. The root would be different as well. Okay. The point well taken from Nathan, because if you went with that drasha that it's hadar, it dwells on its tree from Yiddish, so then it's not dealing with beauty anyway. It's nothing to do with this topic.
That's good for a drush then.
Yeah, but the Gemara here assumes that it is not that drasha, but rather that it's aval ba'etrog divra kol hadar ba'ina. Yeah.
Right.
Now the Gemara asks, Uva lulav, lo by Rabbi Yehuda hadar? You think with regard to a lulav, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't think you need hadar, beauty? V'hatnan, let's just quote it from the Mishnah itself. Our Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ya'agdenu milamala. Rabbi Yehuda says specifically that you need to tie the top of the lulav. We have this. That's the kushalach that we put on. We don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda b'di'avet. You know those little things that you always see people playing with. You stab yourself 5 times on Yontif. That is at least giving a nod to Rabbi Yehuda. That and also the little basket. It's a nod to Rabbi Yehuda's igud. Okay, so it's in our Mishnah, and the Mishnah actually uses the expression Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yagdenu milamala. My timer. Why did he say that? Why did he claim that? Lav mishum debai hadar. Isn't it because he holds that you require beauty? You require some kind of beautification of it. Isn't that the reason? So the Gemara says, "Lo kidikatoni taima." No, the reason is. Why does he hold that? It's a technical reason. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon. Elsewhere in a brighter, Rabbi Yehuda quotes in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, kapot tmarim, which we generally translate as the date palm. Kfot, lichfot is to tie something, to restrain it. V'imhaya parud yachtefenu. If it was the leaves are coming apart. You know, literally, they're splitting apart. So you tie them up. That's what you have to do. As in, it's not because it's a fulfillment of the aspect of beauty that one requires in the lulav that wants to tie at the top, but because the word to describe the date palm branch, the palm frond, is kapot tmarim, meaning kafot, tie it up. And indeed, if you look back in our Mishnah, you can go back that far. It's 29b from 100 years ago. So we see that actually, where does Rabbi Yehuda say his piece? Turn back to 29b. Line 4 of the Mishnah was Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yagdenu milamala, and the clause right before it on line 3 of the Mishnah on 29b is nifritzu alav pasul, nifridu alav kasher. Nifridu alav means that the leaves just started to come apart. They're attached. They're just like they're coming down, like you would imagine the palm is opening. Yeah. So you have to close it back up. That's where Rabbi Yehuda said his piece. Says the Gemara, it wasn't an issue of hidur for him. It was an issue of a technical requirement that it can't be spread apart, but it has to be closed up. So don't assume or presuppose that Rabbi Yehuda thinks there's a concept of hadar, telling you that he doesn't hold of the idea of hidur when it comes to the lulav. Now,
isn't that why?
Ira, go ahead. Sorry.
No, quickly. I was just going to say, what is the purpose of the eged? Isn't the eged supposed to be, you know, when you have it on the lulav, it keeps it all together. Now the Sephardim obviously don't, as we said, they don't use an eged for it. So my point is, is that it's going to be bound together with the Aravot and the Hadassim are all going to be in one unit.
Yes, but what we're talking about here, this point, is actually the Yagdena Milamala is to tie the lulav itself, not the little basket with the Hadassim and the Aravot. It's actually at the top of the lulav. You know, you put that little kushalach thing on top of it. Those little.
So those rings.
The rings. That's the word I'm looking for. The rings, which are made out of lulav material. You put them on. That's what he's talking about. You'll see amongst Sfaradim, you will see some. If you look at the lulav, they tied it all the way around, all the way down.
Right.
That's what we're talking about here. We're going to get to the rings in a minute. We're not the basket, the little basket, the holder. That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, I see.
Your point is well taken, but we're up to the Yagdena Milamala tied on the top because that's where the leaves are most likely to come apart. By the way, Lechatchila we hold like Rabbi Yehuda, but B'diavad, we won't tell someone that it's not a kosher lulav if they didn't tie it at the top. We put those rings there, but we don't insist on it li'ikuva. You wouldn't say that person wasn't mekayim the mitzvah of lulav. Larry, and I thought Ronnie was waiting before. I'm sorry, I never got. No, okay. Larry, go ahead.
My point was exactly the same as Nathan's.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Larry, did you want to say something? You unmuted yourself. No?
Yeah, I think we covered this a long time ago.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
I don't know. Tonight I'm going. You hear me better now?
Yes.
Good. Pasul, we understand Priyetz Hadar to mean a palm branch, correct?
No. Priyetz Hadar is the etrog. Kapot marim is the palm branch.
I'm sorry, Kapot Marim.
Yeah.
But how do we know the eitz is an etrog and not an apple?
Great question. The Rambam in his Hakdama L'Perish Mishnayot actually says this is one of the great examples of our Masorah. Is that every single generation, one after the other, has always identified this as the citron, not the lemon, but the citron as the etrog. I mean, this particular type of citron. I don't know the technical terminology for it. He says the truth is, the Torah does not tell us directly. We only have it basically as an example of something that is strictly part of our Masorah, one generation to the next. What we will see in a few minutes, it's actually coming up right now. What about a quince? Can you use a quince as a substitute or a pomegranate? Back to Francie's point from before, you're stuck. There's no etrog to be found. So you need a beautiful fruit. The Torah says Priyetz Hadar. A pomegranate's a beautiful fruit. A quince is a beautiful fruit. By the way, if you've ever seen a quince, which I have not seen too many times in my life, I'll be honest, but it looks not too far off from an etrog. It's kind of yellow. It looks a little like a pear. Now look at the thing at the Gemara, the next few lines. You'll see that's what the Gemara exactly, Larry, what you're saying now. That's like the question. That's the next thing, and it also goes to what Francis was saying before. Okay, what if you didn't have the etrog? We're ingrained because we live in the year we live in at the time we live in. Hayitachen, you're going to take an orange and you're going to put it there. That's ridiculous. Okay, but we're sitting after all of the Rishonim and all the Achronim. We understand this has been the Masorah for all this time. But the Gemara is asking at a time of shortage, the words in the Torah don't say the word etrog. It says Priyetz Hadar. So it's at least a half a minute. Larry, I can't hear you again. It's distorted. Try again.
Clarification. You hear me?
No,
Try
Larry,
that
you
again.
can't.
The last words, can you hear me? I heard, but everything else I missed.
Go on. I have a problem with my computer.
Sorry. Okay. Let's move on. Okay. In that case. So let's keep going. So the Gemara says, wait a second, goes back again. V'lobai Hadar, you think he doesn't care? Rabbi Yehuda doesn't care about Hadar as a standard for the lulav? V'hatzanan ein ogdin et halulav ela b'mino. He is the one, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. He says that when you tie the lulav, you can only use lulav. Ever wonder why those rings are not made out of plastic? They're always made out of the lulav material because Rabbi Yehuda says that's all you can use. My timer, what's the reason? Lav mishum dabai hadar, isn't it, theorizes the Gemara, because it needs to be beautiful? Look, that's not true. The Hama Amar Rava afilu besiv v'afilu beikra dedikla, different parts of the date palm, which are not the actual palm frond branch, but maybe something from the stalk, the trunk of the tree rather, or maybe some element of some like strings that are within it, but basically not the beautiful branch that you've made into a ring, but maybe something that doesn't look so nice. And that Rava says would be permissible. The Ella might time of the Rabbi Yehuda Hatam. What's his rationale? Why does he require? Why is he so keen on the idea that what you use to tie the top of the etch of the lulav rather must be lulav material? The Rabbi Yehuda Hatam my time of the Rabbi Yehuda Hatam. The Kasar is of the opinion lulav tzarich adged the imaite mina achrina havalahu chamisha minin. If you took another species to use to tie it with, you would have 5 species in your hand and not 4. And this, of course, is a gateway into a major sugya called Baal Tosif, right? The Torah in 2 places in Sefer Devarim, in Perek Dalet, and again in Perek Yud Gimel, tells us, and it means different things, different places actually. The one that we need is really the one in Perek Yud Gimel, Parshat Re'eh. One may not add nor subtract to the mitzvahs of the Torah. So that means can't add mitzvahs. But in the case of Perek Yud Gimel, it means you can't have 5 parshas in the tefillin. You can't have 3 minim. That's Baal Tigra. And you can't have 5 minim either. Now, tellingly, at this very moment, the words Baal Tosif do not appear in the Gemara. It'll appear later on in a further discussion about this subject. And part of the question will be, why didn't the words Baal Tosif appear here? So I'm not going to go down that road now. That's like taking us on an off-ramp into the world of Baal Tosif, which is a major subject. We're doing mitzvahs, but at what point have the mitzvahs become, I just felt like doing it my way, in which case we're not serving God, we're serving sort of we're making the mitzvahs in our image. To add a 5th thing, no, we're not going to add a 5th. So I can only permit, and by the way, Ira, just I'll throw it in now. It's still not the subject now, but that's why those baskets have to be made out of the lulav material. Okay, so and we'll come back to this. It's actually a good hashkafic piece here too, but not for this moment. So the Gemara asks, I'm now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom on 31a, second word in, 6 lines up from the bottom. Uve etrog, mi by Rabbi Yehuda hadar? Does Rabbi Yehuda really require for an etrog hadar? Now that's a strange question. It says Bri'etz hadar. So what do you mean? How could he not hold that way? Yeah. V'atanya, but didn't we learn that Rabbi Yehuda himself says the following? Arbat mini shebelulav kashem shein pochtin mehen kach ein mosifin aleihen. There have to be 4 species in the lulav. Now, in the lulav here means in the bundle of what you take. Here, the word lulav doesn't just mean the stem, the branch. It means all the 4. As you are not allowed to diminish, you cannot remove. So too, you cannot add. And now the Gemara says, Lo matzah etrog, lo yavi, lo parish, velo rimon. Right? Don't bring a quince, don't bring a pomegranate. 2 fruits that you would say these are beautiful. They're round, they're shiny, they're beautiful, and it seems that it makes sense. It's a beautiful fruit. No, says Rabbi Yehuda, you may not do that. Yeah? Now, well, everyone really agrees to that part, but the next part is like this. And here's the Rabbi Yehuda. Everyone agrees to that. That's a statement everybody holds to. But then we have the following. Here's the Rabbi Yehuda part. Kemushin, kesherin, yaveshin psulin. Somewhat wilted elements are still kosher, but if they're dried out, they're pasul. That's what Chazal, the Rabbanan hold. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af yaveshin. Even if any of the 4 species are dried out, says Rabbi Yehuda, can still use it. So again, the original question, 6 lines up from the bottom was, you really think that Rabbi Yehuda even thinks that etrog requires the standard of hadar? now we're kind of back to Nathan's point from before. Well, it says the word hadar. So instead of hadar being hidur, beauty, maybe if you reread it as hadar, so then you understand that, maybe it's okay. Or, because the Gemara does not mention that drasha, that homily, that it's hadar, that dwells, like the word dira. But rather, here's the story that goes with Rabbi Yehuda's thinking. For Amar Rabbi Yehuda, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? So it's kind of weird language. Why would they even bring this up? They're talking about whether an etrog has to be hadar, right? And then they say, well, if you can't have 5, clearly the etrog is the 5th part, right?
No, the etrog's not the 5th. The etrog's the 4th.
The fourth. So
yeah.
you can't have 5, and then and they're saying if you don't find an etrog, why doesn't the mitzvah say al netilat lulav etrog then? If you don't find an etrog, can you just, what do you do? Then it's off. It's good.
George, your mom is 3 steps ahead of me. We're probably not going to get that far tonight based on the time, but that's the ritva that I have on the next screen I'm going to put up. That's the Ravid Hilchot Lulav. That's the Rosh and the Baal Tosot in the iteration of the Beit Yosef. Could you make a bracha if you didn't have all 4? Today, the psak is very clear. No way. No way. But as Francie was asking also, like, what if you didn't have all 4? Like, you have 0. Wait, that's not necessarily the case. And I'll show you an example right now. Top of the page, top of 31b, is the question of whether there is a way to separate out the variables in some way. Here's a story. So it's Rabbi Yehuda tells this story. Rabbi Yehuda, let me just finish the sentence. Massiv b'nei krachin. There were these people who lived in cities, and these cities were walled cities. They were big cities. They were very far from orchards, and there were no palm trees there. And they would bequeath their lulavim to their grandchildren. It means like here's a 50-year-old lulav. It never got burned with the chametz. We're keeping it, and we're just going to give it to the grandchildren. So that seems crazy. How could it be? So Amru Lo, it's not Amru Lahem, but Amru Lo, they said to him, the Chachamim, the sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, you think that's a proof? Ein Shat Hadchak Raya. When you're in a situation that's called a Shat Hadchak, extenuating circumstances, Shat Hadchak, that is no proof. Now, what exactly they meant by it is also the subject, which we will not get to tonight, of the Rishonim trying to figure out back and forth, what did that mean? Misham Raya Ein Shat Hadchak Raya. Does it mean that the fact that these people were giving the lulav to their grandchildren means they weren't really mekayim the mitzvah, but they sort of did it anyway, and therefore it's no proof to any halacha? Is it that under extenuating circumstances, you really could give a dried out lulav to someone? L'chatchila, of course it can't be dried out. But b'diavad, we're stuck. We're living in Siberia. There are no date palms. We couldn't get a shipment in. So either do or don't do. Do we do any part of the mitzvah? Is it worth anything? That's the Shat Hadchak. So maybe we get partial credit. It's a big discussion among the Rishonim, not for tonight. But the point is here, and to George, I'm not really answering your question, I understand. But your question is, well, what if you only had, could you make just a bracha on the lulav? Or just a bracha on the etrog? Remember, we make the bracha when we have all 4 species. We talked about this previously. When everything is fine, we make the bracha al natilat lulav, not al natilat dalad minim. That was a discussion that we had previously in the Rishonim, that the lulav is the tallest of the species. It's considered the most prominent in certain ways, right? Everything's arrayed around it. We talked about the idea that the natila, the main lifting up, was the lifting up of the lulav, and that everything's subsumed under it. But you could have made a case that it's really al natila dalad minim, yeah. And what if you didn't have one of the species? So is it a 0? You need all 4. So Lamaisa, you need all 4. You can't be mekayim the mitzvah. But Rabbi Yehuda, and that's how we got into this. You go back to 31a again. The Gemara had said, really, you think that Rabbi Yehuda even requires a nice looking etrog and not a dried out one? Rabbi Yehuda holds that if they're all dried up, it's fine. All of them dried up. All of them dried up. You have a desiccated, disgusting looking etrog. That's going to work. That's hadar. You don't need the hiddur. How can you not need the hiddur? The pasuk says the word hadar. So there's also a little story here where he said they would give the lulav to the grandchildren. So they said to him, that's not really going to be a proof. On line 3 of the Gemara on Lamed Aleph from Bet 31b. Katani mihat Rabbi Yehuda Omer af Yaveshin ksherin. Right? So nonetheless, the Gemara says, yeah, but in that little proof text that we just brought, Rabbi Yehuda did just say the words that even if they're dried out, it's fine. So the Gemara clarifies and says, where are we? My lava etrog. So he said, even dried out ones, plural, even dried out ones. So isn't that referring to including the etrog? Answers the Gemara, lo, a lulav. It wasn't when he said even dried out ones are okay. He meant a dried out lulav, not a dried out etrog. How do we know? Because the little story that came next is about the grandfather is giving to his grandson a dried out lulav. Follow?
Right. Yeah.
Got it? So what the Gemara did was said, that's not, you want to argue that Rabbi Yehuda somehow thinks that even for etrog, you don't need to have hidur because it said af yaveshin. That's not correct. Keep reading. There's a little vignette that Rabbi Yehuda himself goes into about how the grandparents gave the lulav to the grandchildren, the lulav. So the lulav can be yavesh according to Rabbi Yehuda, but even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the etrog minimally has to be mehudar, has to look nice. Yeah? Okay. Now,
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead. Who's next?
Yes,
Mark,
sir.
go ahead.
The standard of hadar seems to be objective in the Gemara versus subjective or no subjective component. You know, I like my steak super well done, which a chef would say is not hadar.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I like my...
Great point.
And again, Yavesh is Yavesh. I mean, that's sort of obvious on the extent, but in this middle ground...
Right. I don't know how far we want to go into this now. I don't want to give away the whole store in the first shear.
I can wait.
But you're onto something. In other words, is this all an objective standard when we talk about hidur, or is there going to be an element of subjectivity? And the question of subjectivity is, what's the scope of the subjectivity? My personal subjectivity or my community's subjectivity, based on the time and place where I live, which might be a factor. We're going to see, not for tonight, Reb Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk, the Or Sameach, actually wants to argue that maybe the principle of hidur, of beauty, is itself in the eye of the beholder of the community, not of all time, but of the time and place in which you live.
Okay, I mean, for lulav, it sort of got it that way, saying withering versus yavesh.
Right.
That I get, but
right.
Even within there's an element of subjectivity in terms of what's so.
Yeah, there is an element of subjectivity, though.
Okay.
Larry, sorry.
Could you go back? You were quoting the Rambam when I asked why eitz means etrog. What does the Rambam say? Because the question, the machloket, seems, is the word hadar part of it's a two-word noun or is it an adjective?
Right. We may the shot interpretation of the word hadar is actually that it refers to beauty. That is what the word means.
So
literally.
It's an adjective referring to the fruit.
Yeah.
The Rambam is saying that eitz is understood to be an etrog, and you know we're jumping 1,200 years, but or 1,000 years, but Rambam is saying eitz means etrog and hadar means adjective.
Yeah, fine. Yes. I don't remember the exact formulation, but it's something along those lines. You could say it differently as the Rambam says it's something like, when the Torah talks about this beautiful fruit, what is it referring to? Etrog. What's the proof? The proof is your grandfather did it that way.
So
and
why is everybody?
And he bequeaths it to you. And it's not a pomegranate or a quince. It's an etrog. By the way, the Rambam's yurt site was today, 20 of Sivan. It's interesting. You wouldn't know because the Rambam's in the room with us learning right now, so you wouldn't know. But
Sivan?
20th of Sivan?
That's Sivan.
oh, sorry, I meant to say Tevet. Did I say Sivan? Sorry.
Yeah.
20 of Tevet today.
Perhaps.
Sorry, I said Sivan. Why did I say Sivan? That's weird. I wasn't
Why do
even
you
thinking
say
about it.
Tachnon?
Why do we say Tachanun? Because the Rambam would have said Tachanun, so we said Tachanun.
Perhaps when we make the bracha on al netilat lulav, we're not specifically referring to the lulav portion of the arba meaning, but we're referring to the collective when we say we have a lulav.
Yes, for sure. But the point is, it's also, why is that the one that's chosen if the most special one is the etrog? Because it's called colloquially a lulav because it's the tallest of the minim.
Right.
That's all.
So why are we
I was
also-
always raised that the lulav was the spine.
It is the spine. The Medrash describes that, but that's the point. It's the spine. It's the tallest. It's the most formative of them all. Yeah. Okay. All true.
To the question of Larry about Etz Hadar, the Etrogim are a member of the Hadar family, the oranges, the clementinos, and so forth. They belong to the Hadarim.
Yeah.
So when you say Etz Hadar, maybe that's why you cannot take any other fruit except from Etz Hadar. That is, what I've forgotten the place near Chashmonaim that you see the Sukkot, the Psulot, and so forth, and he has also the Bavli Etrogim, which were not accepted because they were very large. I've forgotten the name of it, something Avot or whatever. It's like a little village that somebody built with Sukkot.
The one I showed you pictures, Rabbi, when we were there.
Oh, you did show me. I don't remember the place name, but okay.
I forgot the proper name for it. But they have variety of etrogim, and the large one, I mean, it's size of a small melon, is pasul because it's large. It's called etrog bavli.
Well, that's something else. Yeah, that has to. We'll come to that later when we talk about etrog specifically as a species. It has to be able to be held in one hand. So yeah, it looks like a little watermelon. You know, the melon is not going to work.
Do they have to be fruits that grow in Eretz Israel? All four minim?
No. We like it better.
From Spain, you get them from Spain a lot of times, right?
Different places.
Egypt.
The lulav from Egypt and right.
You get them from Greece?
From Italy.
Yeah.
Right.
Morocco, I saw a grove of etrogim in Morocco, and the Hasidim of New York will not go to Israel. They'll go over there and
Hadassim, you can get the Aravot, you can get from Muncie, Halig and Muncie. You could find them there. You get them on Enfield in the backyard over there. Different places. Just get ready. Here come etrogim from UAE this year, the Emirati.
So why?
Naot Kadumim. That's the place. Naot Kadumim.
Oh, Naot Kadumim. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
Why is the Gemara ignoring Aravos and Hadassim? Why are we?
It's not ignoring it. We're here now. That's like 5 pages later.
Okay.
We're moving in order. By the way, in case it wasn't apparent, and that's why I keep dancing around it when you're bringing it up. It's like yes. We're not in the headquarters now of the world of etrog, but because all 4 species are interwoven, so thematically we're comparing this one to this one, and we're saying, well, the theme is here in the Mishnah. Does it obtain from the other ones? But the headquarters for each of the other species is still coming, right? That's the organization of it. We're in the world of lulav now. So the basis of our conversation is the Mishnah made it so obvious. Everybody agrees. A dried out lulav, chas v'shalom, it's not kosher. The Gemara says, yeah, but there's a braita, which means it's the words of a Tana, which have not been included in the Mishnah. Why not? That's a question. Where Rabbi Yehuda, the same Rabbi Yehuda who was quoted in the Mishnah, by the way, on the first page of Masechet Sukkah as being at loggerheads with the Chachamim. The plurality of sages, they said limit 20 amot. He said could go as high as you want. He's at loggerheads with them here too. For some inexplicable reason, his words were not printed in the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Why not? That's a question, but the Gemara is saying, okay, but the Braita says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a dried out lulav is actually kosher. We don't paskin that way, but we're trying to understand, how could he even hold that? How could he say that? Is that really feasible? And what we're seeing as we're going through it is, oh, wait a minute. There's a question here about whether you can really say that the fact that the word hadar, beauty, associated with the etrog can be translated over to the other species. Now, to George's point, why don't we talk about the hadassim and the aravat in this context? We could have, but we're in the headquarters of the world of lulav, so everything is being compared back to lulav. We're going to get later to the hadassim and the aravot. Is there a principle of hidur for them? To what extent, right? But right now, it's these two that are we're playing one off the other, right? Through the magic of technology, by the way, I'll close out this topic because I want to do one thing, and I want to see a Tosif. We have a few minutes left. We won't go further into Gemara now. We'll have to stop now, but there's a lot of amazing stuff here. I just want to show you the one sentence, because in the world of multitasking, I've trained myself to try to sort of listen and look things up at the same time. So here you have it. Look on the screen with me, and the mystery will be solved. This is from the Hakdama of the Rambam to the Mishnah. This is introduction. It's pages and pages. In my view, it's a must read for any Jew who wants to study Mishnah or Gemara. Not always an easy read, but it gives you systematically, what's Torah Shebaal Peh? What's the oral tradition? What's going on? What's Halacha Moshe Sinai? What's this? What's that? So here we have, I cherry picked it. I'll give you the whole context, but you can see it right here in front of you, right? He's talking about certain things, Halacha Moshe Sinai, and then we have what's called, hold on. Here. He's going to say, I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you a major principle that I must tell you right now, which is, Vehu, Yesh letoin lomar, imayu perushei Torah mekubalim Moshe mipli aklalim, she'amarnu ksheizkarnu amaram kol Torah, nemru klaloto pratoteo v'diktukea misinai, im kein ma hem otam halachot amiyuchadot, she'amru behem shehem halach Moshe Sinai. In English, if you maintain, any Jew, that every aspect of the Torah was received by Moshe, general principles, the details, everything was given, even the nuances were all given from Sinai, then how come there's still a category separate and distinct from that called Halacha Moshe Sinai? Right? Isn't everything from Sinai? So no, there's like this special internal category of Halacha Moshe Sinai. So many of us know the punchline because we've learned it already in school. We learned it in this year and other places. Right? Halacha Moshe Sinai means you can't tease it out from the psukim. It's just a known thing. How do we know it? Teacher to student, father to son, mother to daughter. That's it. There's no writing that we could prove it from the text. This is a fundamental that you need to know. And it is as follows. There are certain things that are explanations that are the accepted explanations that come from Moshe Rabbeinu, where there is no machloket about them at all. That we find that there's certain things that from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until today, till the time of Rav Ashi, from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rav Ashi means from the time of the giving of the Torah till the end of the Talmud, nobody ever argued against them. Everyone agrees they're true. So as an example number one, that anyone should say, Shemisha sime ein adam misamin et eino. Nobody holds the principle of lex talionis, an eye for an eye, means literally an eye for an eye. Nobody holds that. Even though the Torah itself, the Almighty may be exalted, it writes in the Torah, eye for an eye, but no one thought that ever, right? Right? And then one person will say, "Oh, it's money," and one will say it's an eye. No, everybody agrees. It's not Halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a perush mekubal misinai, which is not the same thing as Halacha Moshe Sinai because that's a specific list. He goes on to explain that. But let me just keep going. Don't interrupt. Hold on. Let me just finish this. Gam lo matzanu machloket b'ma she'amar hakatuv pri eitz hadar. We also found there's no machloket in the fact that the text, the scripture, referred to the pri eitz hadar she'echad amar shu etrog. That one person will call it an etrog, ve'acher amar shehu haparish, that it's a quince, or harimon, or a pomegranate, or zuatam, or something else. Gam lo matzanu machloket be'etz avot shehu hadas. Everybody agrees that an eitz avot is a hadas. Yeah, he goes on to describe other examples, etc. I'm skipping. Ushatira b'Talmud nosim v'notim v'nechlakim al derech ha'iyun. When you see that in the Talmud, they're going back and forth, they're arguing, they're duking it out to have a discussion in depth. Umavim raya al echad min haperushim halal v'domeyen k'mo she'amru amaro yitoleh pri eitz hadar, such as the case of the pri eitz hadar. V'ulai hu arimon or parisho zulatan, right? And then they're going to say, well, maybe it really is a pomegranate. Maybe it is a quince or something else. This is not our Gemara, but we're going to come to it soon. It's in our parak. Achivu raya amaro pre-eitz. The fact that it's a fruit-bearing tree of amaro eitz shatam eitzo pirio shavit, right? So that it's the fruit and the bark have the same taste. The amar acher. Another one will say pre-hadar be'ilano mishna shana. Another one will interpret it as we've been saying, Nathan quoted this before, that it dwells on the tree from year to year. Amar acher pre-hadar al kol mayim. Anything that lives near water. Ein zeh. This is not mipnei shadavar safik etzlam. Ad shalamdu la barayot elo. It is not that there was any suffix what an etrog actually is, that they needed these varying proofs. El ra'inu bli safek miushua ad avshav. She'etrog hu nital imalula v'chol shana. The fact that it is taken 1 year after the other, that is its proof. Ve'ein machloket bekach. What's going on in the Gemara when it gives you these other drushas? They're trying to mine or investigate this limud. Where is it in the text of the Torah that we could find hints to it in the text? That's why I was careful to say it's not a halacha l'Moshe miSinai. It's a perush hamakubal mimoshe. V'kach lemidotam gam al hadas. This is about the hadas as well. And he goes on to other points. Further along, then he will say, oh, by the way, there's also something called halacha l'Moshe miSinai, which is a limited list of things where there is no derivation possible at all. So in other words, when you look at the bottom of the screen, I'll close with this. Some of these things, such as etrog, it is a Kabbalah, a received tradition from Moshe, but no one calls it halach l'Moshe miSinai. Bottom line here, I hope you can see it. She'ein anu omrim pri eitz hadar hu etrog halach l'Moshe miSinai. We do not hold that that's a halach l'Moshe miSinai. What is it? It is a Kabbalah of Moshe miSinai. How did it get to us? Because you went to shul last year and you saw it, and 2 years ago, and 5 years ago, and 50 years ago, and it is an unbroken chain. It's one of the Rambam's proofs. Let's actually keep going in the Gemara a few more lines. I want to show you. Here's a good example. You're stuck in Europe, or God forbid, there's something terrible going on in the world, and logistics are a problem, and they can't get the etrog. So they're thinking, hey, we're stuck. Maybe 1 year we'll do a Zecher lEtrog. We'll put another fruit in there. Maybe we could do that. So the suggestion in the Gemara. Keep reading so you see. I'm on page 31b. This is germane now to where this conversation went. Where are we here? Amar Mar. Yeah. So I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top on 31b. The Gemara dials back and says, wait a minute, Amar Mar, the master taught. Remember that clause from the previous page? As we do not detract from the number, so too we don't go over the number. It has to be 4 and not 5, not 3, not 5. Yeah. Pshita, the Gemara says, that's obvious. Maudatema, no. You might have thought, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Lulav Tzarich Eged, since Rabbi Yehuda said it needs to be tied, V'imaite mina achrina hai lechudekai, v'hai lechudekai, kamash malan. You might have thought that if you were to take, for instance, another species, that you didn't tie it onto the lulav. You brought a pear or an orange, and you held it together. You said, yeah, I held it together, but it's not literally tied together. You might have thought that would be okay. Kamash malan, that the presence of that fifth element, even if it's of another species entirely, and it's not tied on, but because Rabbi Yehuda used the expression Lulav needs to be tied up. So when it's tied up, it's actually attached. That has to be made out of the same material. But you might have thought, if you're just holding it in your hand, I got my hadassim, lulav, aravot, that's the bundle. I clutch my etrog in my hand, and then I bring a banana in my other hand, and I touch it on. I'm not claiming it's part of the 4. I'm not saying no, it's 5. I like having an extra thing. That you cannot do. Kamash malan, that would be considered to have a 5th min. When we could talk more about Baal Tosif, we'll have to drill down into what is and what isn't Baal Tosif. After all, aren't you holding a sitter in your hand when you shake your lulav? I am sometimes. Is that a 5th min? Does anyone think that's a fifth species? No. Well, it came from a tree. It is organic, the wood, the paper. Yeah, but it's transformed. Yeah, well, how far afterwards is it transformed? When is it Baal Tosif? When is it not? Yeah, we'll have to come back to that. But here the Gemara goes on as follows.
Is there why some people don't hold the sitter? They have the thing on the wrist, or
right. That's also for convenience. That's convenience. That's convenience. Now look at the next piece. Amar Mar, the master said.
Difficult.
I didn't hear. Wait, Ira was trying to ask a question, but it got cut off. Say again.
No, I was saying that it's very difficult if you're holding the lulav in the right hand and the etrog in the left. It's hard to hold a sitter in,
Yeah. I'm just saying that if someone was able to hold everything in one hand, they hold another object. The Gemara here is saying if that other object is a fruit, no good. You might have thought it's okay because I don't have it in mind that I care about it. No, you cannot do that. It's not just what you hold, it's also what you don't hold. I'm just making the point. There's at least a shiloh to be asked about the sitter, but I'm not answering that question now because it's taking us too far afield. I got to do 3 more lines before 9 o'clock. It's like the punchline of the shir. Let me just indulge me 3 minutes here. Amar Mar, lo matza etrog lo yavi lo rimiv lo parish lo davar acher pshita. Isn't it obvious, says the Gemara, asking itself? We just quoted it 5 minutes ago. If you don't have an etrog, don't bring a quince, don't bring a pomegranate. Isn't that obvious that those things are not the etrog? Why would you think otherwise? Maudetema, you might have thought, lighty, you should bring it, these extra other fruits. You know why? It's a Zecher lEtrog. Kamash malan. Therefore, we learn, no way, not a good idea. Imnin v'nafik churba minei. You know why the Chachamim said? Because oftentimes this will lead to a destruction because people will learn the wrong thing. Da'ati lemisrach. I mean, you could give a sermon right here about this, right? We don't have such and such, so we're gonna do something that's kind of fake, but it's a placeholder. We'll make it up, but we're only doing a temporary stopgap. The Chachamim are saying when you do that, there's a cascading effect of what's going to happen. And pretty soon, you're going to come the year after COVID, and people are going to be holding a quince and saying, well, we did it last year. You follow? I'm frozen. Oh, apparently I'm frozen. Great.
Line.
Do you hear me?
Now
we do. No, we can't.
We need the punchline, quick.
About the punchline, it's like, you want, well, I don't know when I even got cut off. It's like I didn't get a rise out of anybody. I used the word COVID. No one said like, oh yeah.
No, we didn't hear COVID.
Okay.
So that's why you froze.
It was a throwaway line. Take 2. You don't have an etrog. You're running a community. You're involved. You want to teach people that there's such a thing as an etrog. It's not going to be this year. So what do? You take a nice fruit, and it looks, substitute. It's a temporary measure. It's only to hold the place. It's that we don't forget that there's supposed to be 4. You know what? We're not even going to be kind of the mitzvah this year, but we'll take this other fruit because that way people will remember. You remember we used to have an etrog. Today we don't even have an etrog. We have a quince. We have a pomegranate. The Gemara says, be careful. The point of the Gemara is no way. No substitutes. Because once you put in a substitute 1 year, that was what the throwaway line where I was frozen. If it's COVID and you're going to make a certain exception and do something that it's not really a good idea and halachically it's not really permissible, but it's better than nothing. Oh, wait a second. What if the next year people are going to say by the next Sukkot, hey, we don't have to take an etrog. It's 80 bucks or something, 75 bucks. I can get a very nice looking quince and I'll bring it to shul. And I'm a Zionist. I'll bring a pomegranate. I'll have a stamp that it came from Eretz Yisrael. And I'll show everybody, hey, we did it last year. And right here, this Gemara, this is so beautiful. The Gemara says, no, your intention is good. You don't want the Torah, Shalot Tishkach Torat Etrog. I don't want the idea of the etrog to fall to pieces. So if I'm stuck and I'm living in Siberia and I got 3 of the species, let me just take, eggs. Take whatever it is, I'll get a pomela and I'll hold it. Oh, beautiful, a kiwi. No, because ati l'misrach means the kids are watching. The
Slippery
community
slope.
is watching. What?
Slippery slope.
Yeah, and there's the expression I used when I was frozen, so I'll say it now unfrozen. There's a cascading impact of everything that happens in a communal setting, in an observant setting, that has sometimes an unintended consequence. Now, again, that's one of the reasons why, I don't make it too much about COVID. It remains very important to me that any steps that we're taking, like, is it on firm halachic footing? And what are the implications like afterward? And one of the other things we saw on this page, on the top of the page, second line, was the Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, that's your proof that people who live in big cities can't get a hold of a good lulav, so they're giving a dry, desiccated thing. Misham raya? Ein sharad chak raya. We don't learn anything from an extenuating emergency circumstance. It's not a template for the future. It's an emergency. Yeah. And figuring out the balance, what's an emergency and what's not, and if you have people saying, well, everything in Judaism now is an emergency, that's not necessarily responsible stewardship. Rabbi Yehuda was saying, yeah, but it's a story. The Chum said to him, that's not a proof of anything. It was a crazy situation. Who said they were even behind the mitzvah? Maybe they just said, here's a dried out thing, right? And the same thing with the substitute. Accept no substitutes, because we're worried what's going to happen when we get the etrog back. And your intention might be to hold the tradition as a placeholder for when we get back. Yeah, but you might not get back. And I wasn't planning on showing you the Rambam, but the Rambam fits in perfectly with this. That's the whole idea of the etrog, is it's one generation to the next without substitutes and the like. That is all we have time for. Now I'm really hitting the wall, so I'm going to say goodnight now. Next week, God willing, on Monday night at Pasul Latova, we're going to start with Rashi and Tosif on page 31a on the question of Hekesh. We'll talk about what is Xera Shava, what is a Hekesh, what does it mean to be Dorshin Smuchin. We'll talk about that a little bit. And from there, we'll move from there into the Baal Tosif Sugya. All that and more. Come back next week. Ad Khan for tonight.
Rabbi Engel.